Ladies and gentlemen, we now get into our dialogue with Senator MAR Roxas. If you want to make a comment or raise a question, please put up your hand, and I will recognize you and reach out for one of the mics and identify myself, and then we are off with the dialogue. Now, while waiting for the first question, Ma, I thought maybe I should thank you for that very eloquent, wide-ranging view on the challenges that we face and how we should respond to them. There was something quite presidential about that address.
I tried to live up to the expectation.
Do you think that the current leadership of ASEAN, and this is putting you on the spot, do you think the current leadership of ASEAN is up to meeting those challenges?
Dato Tim, I think that for a variety of reasons, each of the respective political leadership in the nations of ASEAN are all distracted, particularly by domestic political troubles. In my own country, our government is absent without leave in the military known as AWOL. It's one thing to try and calm the people by saying nice things about the economy or saying nice things about how we will not be so affected by this turmoil. It's another to actually believe in your propaganda. The most responsible thing to do for our government, as I'm sure it is for other governments as well, is to provide life preservers, to provide buoyancy, so that the real lives that will be affected by the financial machinations that happened in other lands will not be imperiled. The gentleman earlier said it so wisely and so eloquently that really the lives that are at stake, the kilo of rice, the home, the small business, all of these are all at stake. And unless governments play and are willing to play a more interventionist role, then all of these will be put at risk.
Thank you very much. Yes, Joey Quistia.
Senator, we were congratulating you earlier for the ratification of the Japan-Philippine Economic Partnership Agreement. But we've heard that there has to be greater cooperation, greater coordination within ASEAN. And I know that ASEAN has also been negotiating agreements with other countries like Japan, China, and so on. Why are individual ASEAN countries, or why do individual ASEAN countries have to negotiate their bilateral agreements rather than, say, ASEAN working together and negotiating this with Japan, China, India, and so on? Could you kindly explain that? Thank you.
The negotiations with Japan were done on an individual basis, but all under the rubric of an ASEAN-Japan agreement. Like an umbrella, each country would negotiate its own segment of that umbrella. And this was really just a realization that although there is one ASEAN, in reality, I consider there to be four ASEANs. They're the rich and small countries of Singapore and Brunei, the two countries that have really made it and are second world, if there is such a segment, of Thailand and Malaysia, the third tier of Indonesia and the Philippines, and then the fourth tier of the CLMV countries. Each country has different needs, each country has different economic development structures, and so it will be very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all approach for all of these economies. And it's in that reason why each of the countries was allowed to negotiate. But the principles governing all of the negotiations are constant. So while for the Philippines, for example, we may have wanted to reserve rice, Malaysia may have wanted to reserve palm oil, which it did. So it's really a reflection of the different standings of each of the countries. Having said that, the idea of ASEAN, which was put together of the ASEAN Free Trade Area, which was put together nearly a decade ago, now has borne fruit. Whereas we were 10 individual economies, we now have a situation where the leaders of China, Japan, Korea, there's a delegation from the European Community, leaders of Australia, of India, all come to the annual ASEAN Summit, all wanting to participate in this 500 million person market and in the promise of the integrated supply chain and production base. So our neighborhood has been made to look better. Each home now in that neighborhood, each country has to do its best to be the best house on the block. And that's where the competition comes in.